Okay, so you know how a president usually picks people for their cabinet?
Right.
And the Senate, they get to vote on it, give their thumbs up or thumbs down?
The advise and consent.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Advise and consent.
One of the big checks and balances.
Huge checks and balances.
Yeah.
So, but sometimes a president might try to get a little sneaky and skip that whole Senate vote.
Interesting.
Yeah.
How do they do that?
Well, that's what we're diving into today.
Okay.
That's what this whole deep dive is about.
I'm excited.
It's fascinating stuff.
Yeah.
So that sneaky move, it's called a recess appointment.
Recess appointment.
It's a power that's actually straight out of the Constitution.
Oh, wow. So it's totally legit.
Oh, yeah. It's totally there. It's a legit move.
Okay.
But it's definitely a power play. You know?
Yeah.
And so the reason we're talking about this today is because President-elect Trump, he's thinking about using this power to make Matt Gaetz his attorney general.
Matt Gaetz. Huh. Interesting.
Yeah, so some sources are saying that Gaetz, he might not actually get enough votes if it went through a normal Senate confirmation.
So this is like a workaround?
It is a workaround.
Okay.
It's a way to kind of bypass that whole process.
Well, I think a lot of people are going to be interested to see how this plays out.
Oh, absolutely. This is huge. This is really fascinating stuff.
Especially with someone like Gaetz, you know, who's kind of a controversial figure.
Absolutely. He's already stirred up some controversy. So this is just going to add fuel to that fire.
Yeah. What are people saying about this?
Well, there are a lot of folks who are worried about this. They're saying this is a way for Trump to just put his own people in place without any real oversight.
Yeah, I mean, that's a legitimate concern, right? We have these checks and balances for a reason.
Exactly.
So to just kind of sidestep them like this is going to raise eyebrows for sure.
Yeah, so what's interesting is that to make this whole recess appointment thing work, Trump needs both the House and the Senate to agree to adjourn.
So both chambers of Congress have to be on break.
They got to be on break for at least 10 days.
10 days, okay.
At least 10 days, yeah.
Why 10 days?
Well, that's kind of like a safeguard.
Okay.
To prevent a president from just, you know, making these appointments whenever the Senate's just out for like a long weekend or something.
I see. So it's going to be a substantial break?
Yeah, it's going to be a real deal break.
Okay.
So they can't just like sneak someone in.
Makes sense.
You know, when nobody's looking.
So the Senate has to be out for 10 days, but where does the House come in?
Right. So that's where things get kind of complicated.
All right.
Trump, he needs the House and the Senate to actually disagree on when to adjourn.
Okay.
So if they can't agree, the president can step in and force an adjournment.
So the president can basically say, all right, everybody go home.
Go home, you're done.
Interesting.
And that forces that recess that he needs to put Gaetz in.
Wow. So he needs them to disagree in order to get what he wants.
He does.
It's fascinating.
A little bit of a...
kind of a roundabout way to do.
A roundabout way, yeah.
Yeah.
It's...
Okay, so what are the chances of that actually happening?
Well, that's the big question, right?
I do.
So the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, he seems to be on board with this plan.
He does.
But he can only afford to lose a handful of votes.
Oh, really?
Yeah. If even a small group of Republicans decides to vote against adjourning, that could really throw a wrench in the works.
So it sounds like this is going to come down to the wire.
Oh, yeah. This is down to the wire.
So are there any Republicans who've spoken out against this?
Yeah, there are a few who have expressed some concerns.
Okay.
Mike Lawler, for example. He's been pretty vocal about his opposition to this whole thing.
What's he saying?
He's saying he doesn't think they should be going into recess at all.
So he's just against the whole idea of adjourning?
It sounds like it.
Yeah, okay.
He's like, we've got work to do.
Right.
We shouldn't be going on break. And then you have other folks like Don Bacon, who are being a little more cautious.
All right.
They're saying they want to discuss it with leadership before making a decision.
So they're not outright opposing it?
Not yet, no.
But they're also not jumping on board.
Exactly. They're kind of sitting on the fence for now.
Interesting.
Yeah. You know, and it'll be interesting to see how that all plays out.
Right.
Because, like I said, Johnson needs pretty much every single Republican vote to make this happen.
Okay.
So if even a small group breaks away, that could be enough to derail the whole plan.
It sounds like the House is going to be really important in this.
The House is going to be huge in this.
Right.
And then, of course, there's the Senate.
Right.
We know that Majority Leader John Thune, he has said that he agrees with Trump in principle about the idea of recess appointments.
Okay.
In principle.
Yeah, in principle.
But that doesn't mean he's going to go along with it.
Exactly.
In this specific instance.
In this particular case.
Right.
With Gaetz.
Right, especially with Gaetz.
Yeah, and some experts are thinking that the Senate might be hesitant to go along with a recess.
Oh, okay.
If it's just like blatantly designed to bypass a confirmation vote.
Just to avoid that whole process.
Yeah, they don't want to make it look like they're just being railroaded.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So are these recess appointments something new?
They're not brand new.
Okay.
But they've always been controversial.
Okay.
Even Obama. He faced legal challenges.
You did?
When he used recess appointments.
Huh. So there's some precedent for this being challenged?
Yeah. But it's important to note that those were under different circumstances.
Okay.
So it's not a perfect comparison.
You know?
So what happened with Obama's appointments?
Well, remember that 10-day rule we talked about?
10-day recess.
Yeah, that actually came from a Supreme Court ruling.
Oh, wow.
On some of Obama's appointments.
So the Supreme Court actually weighed in on this?
They did.
Okay.
He tried to make some appointments when the Senate was only out for 3 days.
3 days?
3 days.
Huh?
And the court said, nope.
Not long enough.
Not long enough.
Interesting.
Got to be at least 10 days.
So they set that precedent.
They set that precedent.
Wow.
So yeah, this whole situation with Trump and Gaetz, it's definitely uncharted territory in a lot of ways.
Right.
And there's a lot of potential for things to go wrong.
Yeah. What kind of things can go wrong?
Well, legal challenges, for one.
Okay.
I mean, we already talked about how Obama faced legal challenges. And his were arguably less controversial than this. So it's very likely that someone's going to sue over this. Okay. And then there's the political fallout.
Right.
I mean, even if Trump manages to pull this off, it's going to damage his relationships with Congress.
Going to create a lot of bad blood.
Yeah, a lot of bad blood.
Yeah.
And it could make it really hard for him to get anything done.
It's going to make it hard for him to work with them in the future.
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, this whole situation, it really makes you think about the balance of power in our government.
Right.
And how fragile that balance can be.
Right.
You know, we have these checks and balances in place for a reason.
For a reason.
And when one branch tries to overstep its bounds, it can have some really serious consequences.
Yeah. And I think that's what a lot of people are worried about here.
I think so, too.
Yeah.
I think so, too. And it's going to be really interesting to see how this all plays out.
So what are the big questions we should be watching for?
Well, the biggest one is, will those House Republicans, will they actually defy their party?
Right.
And potentially the president-elect to stop this appointment?
Right, because they could be the deciding factor here.
They could be the deciding factor.
Oh.
And if they don't, if Trump does manage to appoint Gaetz this way, what kind of precedent is that set for future presidents?
That's a big one.
That's a huge question.
Yeah, could this become like a common tactic?
Exactly.
To just skip the Senate confirmation?
Yeah, to completely circumvent the Senate's advise and consent rule.
Wow, these are some serious questions.
They're big questions, and they're questions that we all need to be thinking about.
Right.
Because this is important stuff.
Yeah. I mean, you might think that these procedural rules are kind of boring.
Right.
But they really do matter.
They really do.
You have a huge impact on how our government works.
It's like the foundation of a house.
Right.
You know, you might not think about it every day.
Right.
But if it's shaky, the whole structure's at risk.
And this is the foundation of our government.
This is the foundation of our democracy.
Wow.
So yeah, this whole recess appointment drama, it could have some really long-lasting consequences.
It could change things for years to come.
Exactly. And that's why we're all going to be watching this very closely.
Right.
So stay tuned, folks, because this story is far from over.
This is just the beginning.
This is just the beginning.